Who are the matchups to watch as the Dolphins kick off a joint practice and in a few days a preseason game with the Washington Commanders? We're looking at that team in depth. Plus, Grier reportedly makes a call for a potential trade here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs have stopped sporting the way that we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day. All summer long, visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Dolphins having joint practice today with the Washington Commanders. This is a team that is fairly healthy. There will be some potential matchups or interesting players that I think do impact kind of the allure of this, but you don't really know who's playing in the preseason games anyway, who maybe could play if they were healthy. The Dolphins had several players like that last week. So we're just going to look at the Commanders roster as a whole and look at, hey, what are the questions that exist with Miami and what opportunities does Washington provide you to find a new data point in the search for clarity on what your own football team has, right? This is not going to break down how good or bad Washington is. They made a lot of changes. They spent a lot of money in free agency. You can just sum up this offseason from Washington and say they signed a new starting left guard in Nick Allegretti in free agency. They signed a new starting center in Tyler Biadasz. Those two guys are both significant dollar investments along the offensive line. Zach Ertz is here. They drafted Jaden Daniels with the second overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Austin Eckler, a new addition in free agency. Their second round picks also at tight end. So they've remade a lot versus the team. Their third round pick was Luke McCaffrey at wide receiver. This offense is very different than the one, never mind the coaching staff changes and Cliff Kingsbury running the joint. This is very different than what you saw when Miami played Washington in early December. Defensively, Cleveland Ferrell is new. Dorrance Armstrong is new. Frankie Louvu is new. Bobby Wagner is new. Jeremy Chin is new. Michael Davis is new. Their second round picks, Johnny Newton. I don't believe we'll see Johnny Newton, but that was obviously a player that was on a lot of Dolphins fans' radars as far as adding somebody to that defensive line rotation in an effort to replace Christian Wilkins. But you will see Mike Sandersill, a really good nickel player who they drafted in the second round, as Dan Quinn tries to kind of fast track bringing a new defensive scheme there into Washington. A lot of new. Don't think you know this team because of what you knew about them last year when the Dolphins jumped on top of them early and had a really dominating win in performance. I think there's good evaluation opportunities with this football team for Miami. Who are the players on defense for Washington that's going to test the Dolphins' offense? You have to start in the middle, Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. That duo of very physically talented players against an offensive interior that is still the question mark for Miami, with Lee Michenberg at center. You have Jack Driscoll potentially getting some opportunities at right guard. Robert Jones looks like a new version of himself. Is he really a new version of himself? You should be able to get a chance against those two guys. If you watch one thing in joint practice, if you're at joint practice, and if those guys play in the game, I think that's the number one evaluation opportunity that you have. I think with the starters, the passing game, I have high expectations. I'm going to be honest. I have high expectations for what Washington does, or with what Miami does against Washington, because the safeties are new. Jeremy Chin, Quan Martin, second-year player, elevated into a starting role. He was kind of a nickel last year. Their corners, Michael Davis, Benjamin St. Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, Noah Benogany's on this roster, Tariq Castro-Fields, those being the corners. They're long and physical. Yes, that's kind of the central theme of St. Juste and Michael Davis in particular. Emmanuel Forbes is long, but he's not big. He's lean. But for Miami's receivers, even the ones that aren't Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, you'd like to see those guys come out and create some separation. I think between both linebackers, a new nickel, a new starting secondary player in Jeremy Chin, and corners that I think are a little mismatched against the speed that Miami has, I do have high expectations from a passing game perspective for Miami in this joint practice today, and then also going further extrapolating into whatever opportunities you get in the game, at least with the higher ups on the depth chart. So I'll be disappointed if it comes out and Washington has a really smothering performance. Bobby Wagner in the middle isn't the player that he used to be, but Frankie Louvu is an interesting piece that kind of moves all around. And if I were Miami and I'm trying to identify fronts and be mindful of threats that could threaten your protection, Frankie Louvu, who was in Carolina last year, so Miami saw him as well. That's certainly a name that I would have soft circled as somebody that you need to be aware of because he can come from depth as a pressure player. He can play in coverage and play in space. I'll be interested to see how Miami does with their run game because the test is against a lot of physical players on the edge. Dorrance Armstrong and Cleveland Ferrell and KJ Henry and Dante Fowler. Most of those guys are big guys. F.A. Obata's on the PUP for them, which is a bit of a bummer. He's a nice physical player too. But like Ferrell as a new addition from San Francisco, how well do your tight ends and your wide receivers kind of attack and secure the edge in the run game against bigger body types? This is a nice measure for that, where I consider what you had last week when you played Atlanta, and it was, Ebiketie and Lorenzo Carter and a lot of their guards who are a little bit lighter in the trunk. Is a different body type on the edge for you guys to have to work to secure the edge in the run game. So there's nice stuff littered kind of all over Washington's defense and Miami's offense. Nice stylistic clashes versus last week that I think can give you some more clarity on just how diverse we think these elements or what new elements may be there can be for this Dolphins offense. What about defensively? What will the Washington offense test you with? We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with the kids' activities and big work projects and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for everything. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. It's entirely online. Just fill out the brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Offensively, Washington, you kind of know what the scheme's going to look like with Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff, brought to the NFL, was a college offensive coordinator, was a head coach, kind of struggled at Texas Tech, had some good quarterback play there, failed his way upwards into an offensive coordinator job at USC, and then shortly thereafter was extended the offer to be the Arizona Cardinals head coach to fast-track Kyler Murray with the Arizona Cardinals and try to get the most out of him. And I will say this for Cliff Kingsbury. I think his offense probably best tailored a passing game to what Kyler Murray does well as a player. And seeing that potentially working with Jaden Daniels, I think makes a lot of sense. I think there's some questions about the ceiling of the scheme. They like to space you out. They like to invoke quarterback run game, which helps with the fact that they don't really have a lot of heavy formations. Right? They've brought in Zach Ertz as a free agent and drafted Ben Sinnott. I think Ben Sinnott's maybe a really intriguing piece for them, but they're going to be an 11 personnel heavy team. They don't have a lot of size at wide receiver. It's McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Olamide Zaccheaus and Luke McCaffrey, who only recently transitioned to wide receiver, Jamison Crowder, Diami Brown. They don't have size, right? Your biggest receiver might be Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, who is an undrafted free agent out of Georgia, who the Dolphins had on a 30 visit. And he's like 6'2", 205. That's like, they got some size, but it's at tight end. Obviously, they bring in a pass catching back in Austin Eckler. You can see the renewed focus and say, look, we're going to be able to run the ball with the quarterback. We're not really going to do a lot of that in the joint practice stuff. But nevertheless, I would expect an aggressive down the field passing attack that should provide a healthy test with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. But here's where what Miami does in practice against themselves kind of gives them, I think, a leg up against a team like this. Is Terry McLaurin better than Tyreek Hill? I think you can make an argument that Jalen Waddle's better than Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's an excellent NFL receiver. He's definitively a top, I think, no questions asked, top 20 wide receiver in the game. And Jahan Dotson's a former first-round pick from 2 years ago. He's physically talented. That passing game with Sam Howell last year was awful. So they have physical talent. But Miami has physical talent. And I know Cam Smith was just asked earlier this week, who's the hardest guys to cover on the team? And this is Jalen and Tyreek. Right? And all those corners have to experience that. So in the same way that I have high expectations for the Dolphins passing offense when they're going against Washington's defense, I kind of have high expectations when the Dolphins passing defense goes against Washington. This is going to be a very amorphous defense. They throw a lot of different looks at you. They put guys in different spots, but drop to the same thing. And then they'll give you the same presentation and drop to different things. And it really forces the quarterback to make a lot of his reads post-snap. And for a rookie quarterback, no matter how physically talented Jaden Daniels is, and he might have I'd say Caleb Williams has the best arm in the class, but he's got a really good arm. He can hit low percentage throws down the field, outside the numbers, and a guy who's athletic can get off his spot and move. That's a lot of pressure to put a second-year player in that I would imagine in practice, they're going to throw some stuff at him. I don't think they're going to throw a lot of exotic stuff at him in the game, assuming he plays in the game. I know he only had 3 pass attempts in the first game that Washington played, but he led a touchdown drive and hit an explosive play down the field on a dime. But if the corners are used to covering the kind of short area quickness and speed that Miami has, and Washington is 2 talented receivers, but not Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, in my opinion, and you got a rookie quarterback that you're going to throw a lot of different looks at, I kind of expect you guys to have a good practice today. And if they don't, then we'll have to sit down and ask the questions on what happened and why. And you would like to think, even if it doesn't go well, sometimes it just doesn't. I don't want a failure in leadership. I don't want to hear that this team came out flat. Right? That's the battle of training camp, is the attrition in your mind to keep the urgency going and to practice with purpose. This team's far too talented to come out here and just decide, yeah, we're better than them, we're going to lay an egg. Because that's the kind of stuff that cost you a game last year that ultimately end up costing you home field advantage for the first round of playoffs. Sat out here lollygagged around and then didn't had to press because the game got tight, and then you're trying to make a play and then you make poor decisions and have an all-time collapse. And all of that starts now. right? Mike McDaniel talks about stacking days and the foundation that you lay for your entire season starts now. So don't come out against a team that I think you have some really advantageous matchups against. Now, Washington has some ways to test you for sure. But I look at the big picture of both rosters and I say, man, when they try to throw the ball and when we try to throw the ball, Miami has a really heavy tilt in their favor. So don't come out here and lay an egg. If the ball doesn't bounce your way or a guy drops a ball and you get an interception off and it's the splashy play in practice, like whatever. I don't care. But come ready to go. That shouldn't be too much to ask, right? Especially with a team that has the kind of aspirations that Miami has. Washington's offensive line. Allegretti, Tyler Biadasz, Sam Cosmi, third-round pick last year, Ricky Stromberg, Michael Dieter, Chris Paul. Those are the guys on the interior, on the two deep, that much like last week against Atlanta, it's which one of your pass rush guys inside can win there. Neville Gallimore played against Tyler Biadasz at practice every day for years. Right? Can he get going? Can Brandon Peely get going against Michael Dieter? You'd like to think so if Brandon Peely's going to be a successful developmental hit. I actually like the addition that they made in Robert Cooper as far as like just a true authentic nose too. But Ito Jones really hasn't been working. What other opportunities are guys going to take amidst that crowded group to step in there and go against Allegretti? I think is a sufficient level starter at the NFL level. Tyler Biadasz is a sufficient level starter at the NFL level. I think Michael Dieter's a quality depth player because he played guard and tackle. He's kind of the OG Liam Eichenberg version that we have now. Guard and center. I mean, Stromberg got drafted in the third round for a reason. And then Sam Cosmi is a quality starter. Like they got a lot of quality individual players. Who wins those matchups? That's the one area I do think Washington kind of definitively does have an advantage. Who can go out and take some wins? That's what I want to know. That's the big question mark again, because I think you feel good about the floor of that group. You're still waiting to find out who's going to help move the ceiling higher and move the needle. Chris Grier made allegedly, reportedly, it's probably the word I'm looking for, reportedly made a phone call to a divisional rival. We're going to talk about that here to finish on today's episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. We all love sports, and that's what makes this time of year so challenging because the sports aren't sporting the way that we want them to. But FanDuel helps you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open their app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com to start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Aaron Wilson reported last night after the news had come out that the Atlanta Falcons had traded a third-round pick in 2025 for New England Patriots pass rusher Matthew Judon, which is good news for Miami because Judon not on the Patriots means, A, I love Matthew Judon as a player, and I love being able to like actively root for him again. He's got a really fun story if you're not familiar with Matthew Judon and his pathway to the NFL and how he went from a small school player to landing in Baltimore as I think a 5th round pick out of, Grand Valley State? Yeah, Grand Valley State as a redshirt senior in 2016 class, was drafted 146th overall. Played 5 seasons in Baltimore? 16 to 18 or 16 to 20. And that dude has become a really, really, really good NFL pass rusher. And then he leaves and goes to New England, and Bill Belichick kind of unlocks his game even more. Kind of like what happened with Zadarius Smith. Also, incidentally, had an origin in Baltimore and then went elsewhere and kind of had his statistics kind of blow up between Zadarius and where he's been the past few spots in Cleveland and Green Bay. Played 5 seasons in Baltimore, last 3 in New England, and had double-digit sacks before for each of his first 2 seasons before. He only played in 4 games last year and had 4 sacks in 4 games, made some plays. Miami played him the first time. So the Patriots get a 3rd-round pick for Matthew Judon. Say lovey. Glad to be rooting for you again. But Aaron Wilson came out after the original reporting of this news had come out that Judon was leaving the Patriots, and included the Dolphins amongst the teams that had been calling and inquiring about Matthew Judon. Now, the timeline here is kind of fuzzy. For Matthew Judon, pretty much all of training camp, he's been in and out and not practicing, and then he seems to have a measure of good faith, and he goes out there and he practices with the team. But this contract dispute's been going on for a while. So I don't know, is it a matter of Shaq Barrett retires and they call before they sign Emmanuel Ogbah? I don't know. Is it something that they add Emmanuel Ogbah and they still called when Judon started holding out a little deeper into camp? I don't know. But what I do know is that Aaron Wilson reported that the team had called and inquired about trading for Matthew Judon. This is the full tweet. Aaron Wilson. Bears, Dolphins were amongst other teams involved in Patriots-Falcons trade for pass rusher Matthew Judon, dealt for a 3rd-round pick per league sources. Texans made brief inquiry, but nothing developed. This guy's going to call about everybody. And I know the reaction is, guys, we need offensive line help. Why are you calling about a pass rusher? I agree. Here's the thing. The Dolphins didn't have a 3rd-round pick. They will get one back for Christian Wilkins as a compensatory pick. 99% certain that that's going to happen. The Robert Hunt pick, the over-the-cap resources now project that to be a 4th-round pick. They still have their 4th-round pick, and they have 2 5s. What was really telling about the Judon package was NBC Sports Boston reported that one league source stated that they were, quote, shocked that the Patriots got a 3. And Atlanta obviously has big aspirations for themselves. They got Justin Simmons in on a free agent visit. Now they're trading for Matthew Judon. I think they should be. That division is wide open. They've got Kirk Cousins. They got elite physical skill players. The offensive line's a really sturdy group. I think they need help in the secondary, and I think they need help in the pass rush group. I think it'd be excellent moves for them to make. So you understand why them in a wide open division would make a move for a player in a contract year like Matthew Judon is and give up a 3. Miami obviously couldn't have competed with that offer even if they wanted to, because their 2025 3 went into the 4th round this year to draft Jalen Wright. And that looks like a good move so far. But it's a nice reminder that they're going to look for any plus value investment opportunities that they can find. If I had to guess, a team that has 2 5s is probably calling with that kind of being in mind, the compensation package that things would have started with. I have no intel on that. That's just an educated, speculatory statement from me based off of my understanding of the league and how it works and league value for players based off of the work that I do with Joe Marino and Locked On NFL Scout. So I'm not sitting here telling you that that's any kind of intel, because it's not. But it is interesting that they were involved. Their timeline makes it more mysterious and a little bit less, I think, for me, kind of interesting. It makes it a little bit more like, oh, of course they were. Because they're going to look for any good value opportunities. That goes back to trying to trade for Jonathan Taylor when you had Devon Achane, who you invested a 3rd-round pick, and Raheem Mostert, who goes on to score 21 touchdowns and set the franchise record for single-season touchdowns. They were still interested in acquiring Jonathan Taylor. They will call on anybody and figure out what the price is. I think for a team like Miami, with the other investments that they've made in the edge group and Jalen Phillips coming back, and who knows when we'll see Bradley Chubb, but it doesn't sound like there's been any setbacks there. I think a 3rd-round pick, which they didn't have anyway, is probably a drop or two too rich for me. And just keep that in mind. they're calling. And they're probably calling on a lot more players than just Matthew Judon. And more often than not, the last few years, they found a way to connect the dots on one or two and get some deals done. So we'll see what they cook up. But we know they at least called on Matthew Judon, now a member of the Atlanta Falcons. That is going to do it for us here today on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. Here's to a healthy practice with Washington for all parties involved. Hope it's a competitive, fun practice with no injuries. I'll be back to talk to you all again tomorrow, so make sure you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins.